Okay, this is part 2, making differentiation work. And so like I said, we're kind of getting into this other section, and I'm trying to make the sections a little bit shorter because I think it makes it a little bit easier for you to keep up with things. So differentiating products. And this is basically being able to show what you know and show what you're able to get done. So we're looking at paired product choices, and we're going to talk about tiered section in the next section. But we're also going to look at modeling and using and encouraging student use of technology. So remember not to just have those activities that seem very easy to put together. Have them do web searches. Have them, kind of do a information hunt on the computer on the internet. So find different ways of using technology so that students have a better understanding of how to use it. And provide different kinds of choices. They're going to range that are going to access multiple intelligences and give options for gender, culture, and race. Now remember, not all of your girls are going to shy away from, you know, biology dissection. You don't know what your kids are going to do until you actually give them some opportunities to choose it. I remember when my girls were growing up, my oldest daughter was in a robotics club. And part of robotics club, for those of you who have been in one, I found out, was getting to use power tools. Well, she had already used power tools with her dad when she would see him at his house, and so she was already pretty well versed in safety, in how you use different power tools, and which power tools do what. Okay, and so when she got into robotics club, they did most of their activities at this one student's house because his dad had a very nice shop, from what I understood. And this this guy's dad was so very impressed because a girl knew how to use power tools better than most of the guys that were there. Now, granted, they were all in high school. They were still learning how to use such things. But she'd been using power tools since she was probably in third or fourth grade, simply because she had that opportunity to learn about them. So she already was very well versed. So you never can tell what kids are going to know when you bring them into a new project. And also, this is a really good time. So if you're doing a differentiated project in your biology class, talk to the language arts teacher and see if there's some way that you can combine some of your activities so that they're also getting the literacy portions, and some of their papers that they might have to write actually have you can do a technical writing section as well. So this would be a really great way to manage and plan across curriculum with other teachers. Okay, so we have to look at what are some things that we can adjust. We can look at complexity. How complex do we actually want students to do things? Do we want some students to do more complex work than other students? How much structure do they need? Some of our students need a lot of structure, and some of our students, they can provide their own. So how much structure do we have to give to those students who just really need some help getting started? What kind of pacing do we want to do? What kind of materials are we going to need? And then we want to think about that idea of concrete to abstract. Now, the way the theory goes is that we have to go from concrete to semi-abstract to abstract because many of our students, even our regular functioning students, they get so much in the concrete area, they really haven't really progressed to abstract. So, but we can't just jump from concrete, which is um, looking at manipulatives and hands-on materials, all the way over to abstract. Now, sometimes we want to take them back the other direction because we know that in order to better understand an abstract concept like algebra, it's easier to teach that if we start off with the concrete. And so everybody's going to start off in that one particular place. So we want to really look at how does this lesson function? And then we also want to look at student interests and give them some options based on their learning styles. So we need to have some strategies to make it work. So we want to have some anchoring activities. And these are things that they may do at any time when they've completed their present assignment or when you're busy helping other students. So, but the activity always goes back to the overall goal of the lesson or the unit. We also want to do flexible grouping. This helps students to be appropriately challenged, and it also helps us to avoid labeling any readiness issues that a student may have. So when we look at how experiences, and Tomlinson calls it the ebb and flow, we want to go from an individual small group to a whole group to a small group. So we also, and this really should have been, there it goes. That's the way it's supposed to actually look. Sorry about that. So we have individual, small group, whole group, small group, individual. So these are the 4 different kinds of groupings that we can actually have. You know, we can have pairs, there's a lot, or triads. So there's a lot of things that you can add in there. Now, with flexible grouping, you want to, there's like 4 different ways that we're going to talk about it. So we've got to have ability grouping. We don't have to, but this is one of our areas. And this is where you're going to cluster students by ability, by level, by learning style. So everybody in that group is a visual learner. You might have another group where everybody is an auditory learner, and another group where everybody is a hands-on learner. Now that doesn't mean that that's only a hands-on learner. It's just that's what they prefer. Or by their interest, okay? Then you also have individualized or independent study. Now everybody should be able to do individualized or independent study at some point. Some students are going to prefer that, but they can't just do that all the time. Then we're going to have heterogeneous groups. This is where we're going to be looking at having groups with people in those groups with different abilities, different interests. And this is, I think, what we usually assume that we're going to be dealing with in more of a constructivist kind of classroom. And then you have your whole group or your whole class. And this is usually an effective way to present a new concept. But it's only to be used for initial instruction, not for everything that you're going to do. So we're going to differentiate with at least these 4 different elements that we've been talking about. And so we're going to be looking at content. So what are we teaching? How are we going to teach it? What are we going to expect? And what is the learning environment that they're going to be doing this in? So we need to have some strategies to make sure that the differentiation process works. So one of the things that we can do is compact the curriculum. And that means that we're going to be looking at their knowledge and skills. So we're going to start where we think that they have knowledge. Not start necessarily at the very beginning where they're going to be bored, but where they are at right now. And then we're going to give them different types of activities so that the student who's already mastered that content isn't going to be bored, but the student who has not mastered it will get something out of that activity. And we get this from pre-testing and being able to work on their scaffolded information. So when students demonstrate that they don't require instruction, let them move on so that we're not creating a situation where they're going to be bored and therefore frustrated. So what do they need to know so that they can get access to the information? So we're going to have reading materials at different levels. We might need to have some text put on tape for those struggling readers. We also might need to use some spelling or vocabulary lists at different readiness levels. And we're going to want to be able to present ideas both auditorily, so maybe with a podcast, but also maybe through a visual mean like this one. We might also want to be able to have some different films that we put up. Using reading buddies and having them meet with small groups and meeting with your students in small groups to give them short kind of lecture bursts so that you can keep them going until you get to the next section. Also, when you look at the products, you want to make sure that students are able to work alone or in small groups when it's appropriate. You also want to be able to encourage them to create their own products and their own assignments, as long as the assignments contain everything that is in the required elements. So you can give them a list. These are the required elements. Come up with your own assignment. Let me see it before you complete it. And so let them be the teacher. And we also don't want to forget about the learning environment. So we want to make sure that the classroom helps the students to become effective learners. The whole idea of differentiation in school is for students to become independent learners. But we have to make sure that the environment that we create will help students to be able to do that. So we need to have routines that allow students to get help when they need help. So one way you can do that is say, ask 3 before me. So if 3 people you've asked 3 people in the classroom and you haven't found your answer yet, then you can come and ask me. But I want you to ask your friends in class because somebody else might have the answer. And so that way it gives you better chance to be able to help your struggling learners, and you're not constantly answering questions or the same question over and over and over. Also, helping them to understand that some people need to be able to move around while other people like to sit still when they learn. If you have a pacer, let them go to the back of the room and do their pacing and reading to themselves. If you have somebody who likes to stand because they really kind of can't sit still, get them a podium. I used to have podiums in my classroom for students like that. Um, Work with the students' learning ability and learning style. And make sure there's places in your classroom where you can work quietly as well as where you can have collaboration. So maybe some individual desks or places in the back of the room with tables in the front of the room. And you're going to also want to have materials that are going to reflect different cultures, different types of home settings, you know, and this could go across the board depending on what kinds of class that you actually teach. And then set clear guidelines for individual work and how that is to be completed, and when and what types of assignments are available for independent work. Okay, learning contracts. Learning contracts can be very, very useful for teachers in 2 or 3 different ways. One of them is when you have that student that just has a hard time getting started or is a little bit OCD, or rather a little ODD, oppositional defiant. They're not really into getting any work done. A learning contract is a great way to start dealing with that. People tend to do more when they actually put their name on the dotted line. Um, And so a learning contract can help you with behavior management in your classroom, just like a behavior contract can. Um, but when you have a list of activities that you have students choosing from, you might want to have a learning contract to say, okay, these are the things I'm going to learn. This is how I'm going to go about doing it. And here's where I signed that I'm agreeing to do this. So you look at assessment, you look at different ways of making sure that everybody gets their work done and that everything works into the module or the unit that you have set up for your students to learn. And so this is really a good idea when when you don't have just one type of assessment or one type of learning activity, so that you can have some different activities that students can learn from. You might want to have a learning contract. And I've got some examples here. So this one you might use for elementary or early elementary. Okay? Um, and this one might be more appropriate for middle school or high school or later elementary. To demonstrate what I've learned about, I want to, and they're going to give you basically a short proposal of how they're going to assess themselves. All right, so here I have a couple of different learning strategies. And this one is it's called RAFT. It's Role, Audience, Format, and Topic. And this learning strategies, and I'll be bringing learning strategies throughout the semester that I'm just going to throw in here every once in a while. And it's writing to learn activities that enhance understanding informational text. This isn't always easy for kids to be able to figure it out, okay? So it encourages creative thinkers, but it also motivates them to reflect about things that they've read. So the role of the writer, what is the writer's role? Okay, so they have to think about it in all these different ways. The audience, who's going to be reading my writing? These are questions that we usually teach when we're teaching writing, but we can actually use this for writing in different ways. So in the science classroom, we can use a raft. So I'm writing a science report. Who's going to be reading this lab report that I'm writing? And so they might want to have to think about that. Um, so what's the subject of the writing? And why would I be talking about that? So it forces them to process different types of information, and instead of just writing out answers, they have to actually think about it.